Welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are available in podcast form. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And here we are, Michael and Margaret Lyons, as I talk over the music bed. But we are here to defend your rights tonight. Your rights to be wrong.
Right. True.
True. And so for all you married guys out there, we're here for you. I know you can't laugh, but just, laugh inside. Hi, Ma. See, now I'm getting myself in trouble. Okay, so I'm Michael Lyons at this moment.
And I'm Margaret.
Margaret, this is the Soul of Everyman, and welcome to. This is an interesting show because a very, I would say, great person died today, and he's someone who many people are familiar with. His name is Ravi Zacharias. He's Indian-born Christian apologist, and really a brilliant scholar and a brilliant debater and a brilliant speaker. And we listen to all kinds of people, and Ravi's one of our favorites. If you have a chance, he passed away today, but his archives are extensive, and they go back 30, 40 years, some of them, you can find them all over YouTube. And I would encourage anybody who has any kind of interest at all in just philosophy and in comparative religions and in really humanism at its root, at its core, Christian humanism, I would listen to Ravi. He's someone who's unapologetically unafraid to debate anybody on anything at any time. And one of his most famous kind of aphorisms was to be prepared to defend your position, at all times. And he did it with grace and humor and with incredible learning and intellect. And so this show is sort of it's in honor of him. And we picked a quote of his, and it's an interesting one because the other thing about Ravi was that he loved interesting elliptical statements, I would say. Statements which kind of made you think. And so the one that we have tonight is a quote of his it's funny and it's interesting at the same time. And it goes like this: respect for the right of another to be wrong does not mean that the wrong is right. And you just sit there and go, yeah. Thanks for that brain twister, Ravi. But that's the kind of stuff that he would love to do. And the statement is interesting because really the core of it is that.
Well, let's just go through it again. I'm going to emphasize it a little differently.
Yes.
Okay. Respect for the right of another to be wrong does not mean that the wrong is right.
Yes. And what I believe he's trying to say there is a couple of things. One, of course, on the obvious point is that you are tolerant of all people's opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And tolerance in this case does not mean that you agree. In fact, the essence of tolerance and the essence of what I would call classical liberalism is to allow the exposition and discussion and dialectic on any opinion. If you look at the Socratic method,
right,
it's all about dialectic and espousing a point of view and being allowed to both defend it and to accept criticism of your point of view without becoming emotionally invested in it. That's the whole point of learning. The basic tenet of learning is that you will be presented with information that you don't already have. because you are learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that it may contradict a view that you have already. And this should not bother you.
Right. You shouldn't. This is, again, as you said, Socratic. Was how you were educated in Greece. You were being trained on how to think, and that meant that you weren't going to go into reactions. So the freedom to be able to voice a thought or present a concept or speak about it, you also had to be able to defend it, because you always knew that someone was going to question. The foundation of the Western phrase of always question. But it's questioning not to be snarky, but it's questioning to learn something, not just to find a way to be disagreeable. In fact, that kind of approach was considered ill-educated. That was the foundation of ill-education. So if you were considered a leader, just as the Greeks had elected their senators.
I don't know if they were called senators in Greece, but okay. I'm with you.
Well, their body, I thought they had a senate.
I don't recall. Let's say I need to be refreshed. I'm not sure if it was Senate, but regardless, there certainly was popular election.
Right. But you had to be able to do this. You had to be able to stand and give a speech, as well as present and defend.
Yes, the classic dialectic.
Right. Without a what is that? The little monitor that they have now.
No teleprompter.
That's it. No, because it was considered a cheat sheet.
Yes, and you see this in even today in the foundation of the public schooling system in Britain. I'm not sure if it's not really part of our public schooling system, is that you were trained in forensics.
Yes.
And anybody, of course, who wanted to enter into any sort of public life or politics is trained in stand-up, toe-to-toe, no teleprompters argument,
right.
and dialectic in order to both defend and make your points. But I mean,
just their parliamentary meetings.
Parliamentary meetings where they slam that book around. That poor book. They must have to replace. They must have to replace that thing once in a while because it gets slammed around a lot. It's a damn big book too. You got to be like, you don't just pick up that book like that's like a couple of Talmuds at least. And you don't slam. Never mind. Now we're going off the track.
You're off somewhere, dear.
We're off the track.
I'm just saying that you do need to have that skill. And actually, in India, it is considered primary if you're doing something like that.
Well, it's interesting because they both have an oral tradition in India that because of the influence of the British schooling system, the British public schooling system, it was augmented and in some ways it was cross-cultural.
Yes, cross-cultural.
Yeah,
paralleled. Yeah, but they always had an oral tradition in India.
Yes,
and
you also see it. I mentioned the Talmud. You also see it in the fact that the oral tradition of the Talmud, and even prior to it ever being put onto the scrolls, was this oral storytelling tradition. So it's foundational.
It is. It is foundational, and it was also, I know in Tibet too, when they were teaching, that was the way the masters were teaching students. It was a back and forth like that. The way the Greeks had it when they were teaching.
And people learn well that way. I mean, we're going off a little bit, but it's very true that dialectic, that learning through questioning, which is the whole basis of dialectic, is that you pose a question to your guru or your master or your teacher or your sensei or whomever, and the answer oftentimes is requiring you to defend your question or defend your point of view, and the learning portion of that is to realize that very, very close to the heart of what we talked about, that the dialectic was not emotional. It was based on reason, or is based on the free exchange of ideas, and the acceptance both of the fact that you were very likely to be wrong or have to modify your position. One of the classic forms of dialectic would be to move the other from their position to a position more compatible to yours, or to one where you both can agree, or you can agree to disagree. Now, these are all sentences that people have heard, but they aren't used very much in modern American discourse. We don't do any of those things.
Is there modern American discourse?
There is, but it's kind of written on chewing gum wrappers. I don't know.
Well, it's exactly that. To be able to do that debate in order to enlarge it so that it does two things. It acknowledges all viewpoints, as well as it's supposed to expand the field so that everybody can see where people are actually standing on an issue.
Versus this emotional sort of shutdown. But again, back to this wonderful statement of Ravi's, because the respect for the right of another to be wrong, the first part of it, the very first word is respect. And the classical dialectic, whether there's a power, whether there's a disparity between the master and the students, doesn't matter. The student's question is cherished.
Right.
Because although the master may say, I've heard this question a million times, it means that the student has reached a certain level. To pose the question requires the student to have an inquiring mind. It requires the student to have made some observation and then to pose. So part of dialectic was learning how to pose the question, or espouse your belief. And you would do it with respect and humility on both sides. The master would never say to the student, well, that's a stupid question, because there were, again, the whole idea, there are no stupid questions. You have respect for the right of the other to question and indeed perhaps be wrong, or at least not be completely right. So the openness, right?
Yeah, you're making space for the fact that question coming in is based on an assumption that may be right or may be wrong, or may be blurred for this person asking the question. Therefore, he asks. And it opens a conversation so that you can have an opinion, right or wrong, and you're willing to discuss it, willing to learn.
Well, and master to student, and Ravi was a master at this, was the posing of the question was an opportunity for both.
Right.
Both for the master, and you say the master, but really it's the receiver of the question has an opportunity to understand first, where is this coming from? So you get an insight into the mind of the student, of the querent. Let's call it the querent, and the one who's being questioned. Because a question can be a challenge in regards, because you have to say, well, I now have some insight into how this individual thinks. We are not assigning right or wrong. We are getting insight. So there's a respect for the other's current viewpoint. And then Ravi would very often take that viewpoint and say, okay, so what you are saying, so restate, that part of dialectic was restatement of the question.
Right.
Almost the very first thing was to restate the question so that both understood what was being, what was the topic of discussion, what were we going to talk about. And so you would begin there. You say, oh yes, that's what I mean.
Well, it's basically agreeing on the language.
On the language, yes.
Okay, so that, the one person's question may be using a certain word a certain way. It depends on the culture, so you would always restate the question, not using the exact same words, but in a manner in which you're sitting there and going, okay, so from this viewpoint, it looks like this.
Well, and in the restatement of the question, one of the classical things was that you would you would try to present back to the querent what you understood of their question,
Right.
and give them the opportunity. And this is like part of the respect thing, was give them the opportunity to say, no, that's not what I meant. So oftentimes a lot of these dialectics, especially the Socratic dialectics, would spend a lot of time in the beginning trying to frame the question. You
Right.
spend a lot of time just kind of playing ping pong back and forth saying, no, that's not what I was asking you. So they would get to that point where they finally agreed. And that's classical too. It would always be done in a respectful manner, where the querent brings a respectful question in good faith, that they really want to understand or to know. And this is the right way to do it. Obviously, people can bring questions in bad faith, but we'll leave that to the side. And then the process of defining, as you say, agreeing on the language would say, well, you said this. Do you mean this? And you would get to the point where you now have a classic meeting of the minds. Now you understand what the arena is that we're going to play in.
Right.
And the interesting thing about that, Margaret, is all questions are meaningless without context.
Right.
And so part of dialectic was defining context. What are we actually kind of trying to talk about in a respectful way?
And that's clarity.
And the bad faith way of doing that is to take the question and put it completely out of
context. Yeah.
Did you have classes when you were going to school where they would tell you the logical fallacies, the whole thing, and one of them was to take a question and make it a straw man, make it so it was, would put it out of context, or put up an argument that was just there so you could argue against it, the old straw man argument. It was a bad faith way of arguing, and therefore the Socratic method, the Greeks and so on, would define these. You could call somebody and say, "No, you're doing you're doing a number 7. That's not." That's a number 7. We can't. We're off the table now. We have to come back. You would
be able to define when it was going awry, when the whole focus of this is to be able to ask a clear question and receive some kind of an answer. And if it's not the purpose, if that does not become the purpose of this conversation, then you were allowed to say, now wait a minute.
You basically would call people on the fact that they weren't arguing within the rules of dialectic, that they were straying into emotion, straying into logical fallacies. And this was more than just a teaching tool. It was a cultural thing where it was important. You see this in Britain too. It's very important how you bounce that book. You've got to do it the right way, because there are certain rules that frame the debate. And inside the rules, or inside the sphere of the debate, you can do many, many things, but if you exceed them, then you're no longer debating in good faith. You've lost respect. In doing that, you lose respect for yourself. You diminish yourself, because you've been pushed into the point of having to cheat. It's like a headbutt in boxing, and you also and you diminish your respect for the querent. You're saying, I can't answer your question, so I'm going to resort to something which is kind of like an ad hominem attack, another one where you don't attack the argument. Right. You attack the person.
Yeah. You're not.
The only reason you're doing that is because you're, whatever.
Yeah. No, that was never the issue. You weren't supposed to be attacking the person. This was an exchange of, and maybe it is about a person, but you still don't go into that realm if you are trying to understand exactly what's going on.
And whenever you listen to Ravi, he was a master at this, because he would he would debate people who would come at him with an ad hominem attitude.
Yes.
You're just a XYZ and he'd say, okay, I love you, I respect you. Let's begin again. And he had a gentle yet incredibly informed way of getting people into a meeting of the minds. We're not going to attack each other on our physical characteristics or something like that, or our philosophies. We're going to debate this question within the context of respect, and he was a master at it, and he was able to turn people who were predisposed to hate him, and were asking questions not in good faith, and yet come to a human meeting, a meeting at the human level, and then move into a realm where we could discuss the idea and have a logical, respectful question and debate without the kind of the strings and the ad hominems and the emotion, Not that he wouldn't debate things with emotion, but it was always higher, expanding, giving people respect, allows them to, it furthers communication rather than shut down anybody.
Well, he would also take their question, find the foundation, the premise, and show them how they're actually thinking of it, the process for going from one to another, the assumptions that had been made. And is that assumption really true? Because there's many times when a question is asked, the generalities, they make an assumption of, everybody does that. Like, have you really thought of that?
Well, and just to go back, he was so well trained in dialectic that he could see immediately if a question was posed with an underlying assumption. Well, everybody does that, like you said, and his training allowed him to do the first phase, which is where we will define the terms and understand that we're not standing on top of a straw man or an assumption, or at least illuminate that. Say, okay, well, your assumption is that everybody does this, and we all know that that's not true, so let's broaden it. He would very gently, but yet very very forcefully in regards, just in a sense that he was very powerful at it, illuminate the question.
It's undeniable. His logic was undeniable.
Right.
That was really where it came down to, because his logic was exceedingly precise.
He had that kind of a mind, and so the statement here kind of gives you some insight into the man. So he would always come to a person's question with respect. In other words, he would never start off with, even when people would attack him, start off with an attack back, as he prided himself on being able to say, I understand what you're doing, I understand where you're attacking, but yet let's respect each other. Let's agree that we will talk about this piece of it, which doesn't have these strings and these emotions and these assumptions, and see if we can further the discussion. Now, of course, with human beings, you can find people who will, no matter what you will do, they will argue in bad faith.
Well, he normally had gone to many colleges and many forums where there would be a discussion about a certain subject, and then he would open the floor up to questions.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, in that kind of an environment, if you're going up there to ask a question, you're doing it because you really would like an answer. Because that's a baseline. You really need to have an answer. You're not there just to beat on him, which is, some people say that they do debate, but what they do is just beat. And that's not a debate at all.
No, not at all.
So in that particular environment, even if they do come at him aggressively, they're asking the question, which usually he'll key right into that and begin to peel it apart so they can see what they're actually asking.
Yes, and the techniques. If you're a person who is in any way interested on learning dialectic, he's a wonderful example of how you look at how he does what he does. It takes some time. And if you have any training, it helps, of course, to say, well, I was told this, but now I'm seeing it put into practice, how one actually can frame a debate and have a respectful exchange of ideas. But now the second half of his statement here is where Ravi would hold his ground, because you accept everyone's right to question, and we define the terms and we understand what the question is about. You have to remove this very huge stumbling block, which can cut off debate at the second stage, which is that you, in allowing the question or entertaining the question, sometimes people feel that you're saying it's right, and sometimes observers of a dialectic will say that, and it's key, and we'll talk about it maybe on the other side of the break, because we're going to go to the break in a minute. But it's key to understand that the question and the discussion is a journey to understanding. It is not just because you accept somebody's question doesn't mean you're saying that they're right.
Right. Well, you get to the point where you understand the question.
Right.
That's the very first step. Like small children, and they ask you something. You have to sit there and you go, okay, do you mean this?
Right.
Like they're pointing. Are you pointing at that? And you start naming everything. But trying to get the question straight. And then you can figure out whether or not the answer is appropriate.
Well, or that or that you've reached a point where we can now have a productive exchange. And whether or not at the end of that productive exchange anybody's opinions have been changed is the third stage. So let's take a little break. You guys can think about dialectic and about Socrates and Plato and all those guys, and we'll come back on the other side and have more fun.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book one of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time. The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lynes, the award-winning author of There Is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
The Timeless Esoterica radio program with Dr. Bruce is broadcast on the fourth Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, on ArtistFirst.com. We explore topics including the paranormal, alien life, mysteries, conspiracies, hidden history, oddities, and much more. Each show will feature a special guest with exciting and thought-provoking discussion. Always keep an open mind, an open heart, live forever, and remember Dr. Bruce believes in you.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on ArtistFirst World Radio. All past shows are archived. You can pick them up in podcast form at ArtistFirst.com. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lines.
Thank you very much, C-Man, and RESPECT. Find out what it means to me. Yeah. No, tonight we are talking about, well, actually this show is at the first half hour and the second will be as well, is sort of an honorarium to a great philosopher and a great apologist, Ravi Zacharias, who passed away, I believe today or late yesterday or whatever. But the core of his work was in really getting people to the place where they could have a free exchange of ideas. We said it in the past half hour, in the earlier half hour rather, that he was really a classic liberal as well as a master debater and a master of dialectic. And some of the things that he mastered are so lacking today. You know, they don't teach them, and they're extremely important because, you know, you will find as you go through life that there are going to be people with whom you do not agree. Weird, right? You know, those people, and they're all wrong. You know, we know they're wrong, but the science of dialectic, or rather the technique of dialectic, allows you to prove that they're wrong. That's not what it allows you. It allows you to have a respectful discussion over a difference of opinion, or even a difference of a philosophy. And at the end of the day, and this is the most important point, at the end of the day, you can do 3 things. You can understand the context. You can pose a question and talk about a question and answer, or defend your point, or have them defend theirs. And at the end of the day, you can both be illuminated. You can understand more about that other person. They can understand more about you. And you may, at the end of the day, both not agree on the point of discussion. However, you will find that you are at least more able to understand why somebody might hold that opinion. If everything is done, and these techniques are really all about keeping the discourse on a logical, unemotional, and yet passionate. You can argue for your point passionately, and you can listen to passionate argument, but you don't allow these kind of headbutting type of fouls in the discussion. You agree on how we're going to discuss things in a respectful manner, and we also agree that even though you may entertain somebody's question in philosophy and discuss it, you don't and this is what people unfortunately run into, is they feel like they're going to discuss something, that they're somehow giving it legitimacy, and they're saying to that person that it's right. And that's not the case. The case is that it's important to discuss these things, whether or not at the end of the day you are able to drag this person to your point of view, or convince them rather, or the other way around. You have to be open-minded.
Mm-hmm.
And classical liberalism is all about open exchange of information and ideas using dialectic or other forms of debate. And we are sadly lacking in that in the world and in this country in specific, because too much of the debate, and you hear it every day all over, whether it's on social media or anywhere else, is all about shutting down those with whom you disagree, and touting to the heavens those with whom you agree, and giving no opportunity, no air whatsoever to any opinion that disagrees with your currently held opinions.
Well, it's not considered a Socratic exchange. It's not considered an educated exchange. It's equivalent to the Neanderthal method of bringing clubs and just sort of hitting the other person as hard as you can.
The classic clubbing.
Yes.
It's kind of a rave thing.
Yes. But it's interesting to me that is not taught. You know, this is not a free exchange of ideas. It is just bullying at that point. You know, because what it means is you're bringing a closed mind to a conversation.
And it's almost an oxymoron, right? A closed mind and a conversation are two things which don't go together.
Well, in its true sense, yeah. You know, as you said, in the classical sense, yes, if you've been trained that way. But I don't see this being put forth as a method of educating and disciplining your mind. I mean, that was always considered, for the Western world, that was always the high point of things, of understanding that your mind is flexible, capable, strong, and in taking on whatever it is that's going on and being able to process it, handle it, and come up with a decision that is cogent and defendable. And you can explain reasons and why and how. And you don't see this. This is not being taught. It's like debate is not being taught, or what the conversation. It was more than just debate. It was supposed to be conversations to civilized people with civilized people. Civilization meant you made room for differences.
Right.
Okay, the true definition of tolerance.
Right.
All right. Instead of redefining tolerance as a label, this person's intolerant. You know, it's like, no, this is just, what is your definition at this point? You're not making room for being able to have a discussion of any kind.
Right.
All it is the Neanderthal shut down, let me hit with the club.
Exactly. It's the difference between philosophy and ideology.
If you're fighting for it, but you're changing the field then. If you're talking about ideologies, then it's a different field.
Well, I think people are confusing the two. Just as you say, you know, in a classic just to refer back to Ravi, his ability to open the forum, he would have these talks, and he was a Christian apologist, and so a lot of his lectures were about the Christian faith, and he would entertain and welcome questions from people who were agnostics and atheists and different religions. He even said once, one of the quotes he had was, to be born in India, because he was born in southern India, to be born in India was to be born in a sea of religion.
Right.
Because India is a very interesting country. You have all the great religions of the world represented in one form or another. Of course,
right.
Hinduism and Buddhism are the predominant religions, but these religions, these philosophies, are ancient, and they have many influences over the years. And you have Christians, and you have Jews, and you have many other types of faiths, and the tradition of the surahs and debate and explaining that the master querent and master kind of back and forth was so deeply ingrained in the culture that his transition to becoming a Christian apologist was using all of that wonderful ability to reason through words and to have this reasoning debate over principles, and then over the logical extension of principles to a particular situation. This again is sort of, we also call it Talmudic. This idea of debate was so central to his upbringing, and then again kind of enhanced with the British public school kind of debate, and it gives the mind a wonderful fine point and edge. You're able to cleave ideas right down the middle and show this is where this part connects to this part. It becomes a surgical use of words and language, and beautiful to both take part in. And I would say, just to personalize it, when we would have people come into the store, we would have conversations with them. We had people, to be in a rock and gem store is to be having a business in a sea of religion. Because every bloody thing would walk in the door. You had people who were using the rocks for Reiki. You had people using them for energy. You had people using them for science, and blends of all those things. And we would have, and you would have, some amazing conversations, and you had to do exactly what he did in writ small. Find the common language, understand the question. You would be the master behind the desk, and they would come in with the question, and you would have all levels. You'd have children, just able to, what is this rock? And then you'd have adults coming in and saying, what is this rock? We'd have, our adults were very childlike, but no, we had. That you don't need to be in this giant lecture hall in Oxford somewhere to have a wonderful dialectic and debate and question and answer and some agreement and some elucidation and illumination.
No, this is true. And always the common ground was they wanted to know.
In the true sense.
Mm-hmm. The question of they want, no matter, nothing was a silly question.
Right.
And it's taking that as a foundation. Nothing is a silly question.
Right. And that's basic to Socratic debate, dialectic, was that the student, the querent, has a good faith question, and you never say to the querent, "Oh, that's a stupid question."
No,
because that's shutting them down. Then you're not playing the game right.
Well, you're not there to teach then. That's the difference. You what field are we standing on? Are we in this Neanderthal with the clubs, or are we actually in a place where we can actually learn something? It's that question posed and how it is received will tell you exactly what kind of field you're standing on.
And just to take an example, oftentimes a question would lead to a much broader discussion and involve, other people in the store, either as active listeners, which was also part of the Socratic debate. The whole idea of dialectic is you would have your, you would have your kind of seconds listening in, and you would be both arguing for your point with your seconds as kind of your backers, and then they'd have their seconds as their backers, and sometimes you'd have teams. I mean, this forensics.
Yeah.
Forensics was all about this idea of, well, I will let my esteemed colleague pick up the point from here. I've laid the ground for them, and we wouldn't do that. But in the store, a question from even a small child asked with an open heart could become the vehicle through which we would involve, or you in particular would involve everybody else in the store.
Right. Yeah, just when they would ask questions about this giant crystal that was about the same size as they were. And their eyes are so wide and they look at you. Is that real? Oh. Yes, it is. Oh. Does it grow like that?
Right.
It comes out of the ground just like that.
Just like that?
Oh. It's cold.
And see, so that the basic respect would allow the most innocent question to be entertained, and then you, as the person who's being queried, you could discern where we were, what was the field, and then give information and listen, and it becomes a conversation. It's just a piece of dialectic if it's done right. You're freely exchanging ideas.
And when you have a place that is open like that, in other words, the field is open, and people can bring in these things, what seems like silly questions, but you get the most interesting interchanges at that point. Like that little child I was just speaking of had walked over to the giant crystal and hugged it because it's so pretty and I love it. And you're just like, this is cool.
Yeah.
This is fine. It's, if other people would be looking at it like, oh, it's okay to hug a crystal? Like, obviously.
Obviously. And that goes to the sort of, to the second part of his quote, where you don't place a judgment without context onto anybody's argument. This child's argument was that the crystal needed a hug. Well, it's an action more than an argument, but the point being is that the context of the child saw the crystal as something fascinating, wondrous, beautiful, that he wanted to express his love and appreciation, or her love and appreciation to, and this was what they had. Yeah. But the humanism there is on display, and then if you're able to take that and say, yes, it's not what I would do, but yet it's what we all do when presented with something wondrous that we want to express our appreciation for. We want it to we want to envelop it, we want to bring it closer, and so you elevate the discourse because the common theme, even if you may say, well, that's not what we should be doing, it's technically wrong, let's say, it doesn't make your entertainment and discussion isn't sanctioned. You don't say, well, everybody should be hugging crystals, or you don't know, or you're doing it wrong. No, you're saying that this expression is as valid as someone else's expression of their wonderment of it being, for meditation or something. They see
their experience. If an avid collector came in, he would be looking at it very differently, appreciating the fact that it did already come from the earth raw like that, but enormous. And his response would not be necessarily to hug it, but he would be going over to appreciate its crystallization structure, its chemical makeup, and why it's doing that, and how rare is it, just that interchange. You just open the field up so that the person, querent, can have an experience of having their question answered. Just a lovely thing.
That's the key of it. That's one of the keys, is that the experience of having your question answered, or at least entertained, whether you come to an answer or not, is incredibly important. It really underlies the whole of the three: the framing of the question, the discussion, the eventual resolution, whether we agree or we disagree. None of that, all that is part of it, but the actual underlying human experience is that you are able to have this exchange. You're able to enjoy the exchange of ideas, the beginning, the middle, and the end of the exchange of ideas, because it's extremely human to want to communicate.
Right.
And shutting down. So another example is sometimes these people who are rock hounds would come in and say, "Oh yeah, those people who use the crystals for meditation or Reiki, they're crazy." And you would, the challenge is they're asking for you to agree,
Right.
And say, "Oh yeah, they're crazy. We don't know why they come in here, these crazy people." And they're also asking for affirmation, and they're almost challenging you, say, "Well, if you think of this, then I'm going to think less of you." And the verbal jujitsu there is to say, "Oh yes, but the way the crystal energy can be thought of in a scientific way is that, when you stress a crystalline matrix, electrons actually do move, and it's called a piezoelectric effect, and that actually creates magnetic and electromagnetic fields and disturbances which can be felt and seen, and you
measured."
But it doesn't matter. But in essence, you take them from this challenge, agree with me and shut down, to, well, yes, you're right, and they're right too, and both of you are right, and we're going to oil this into a discussion about ideas and not a affirmation of, I'm right and they're wrong, and you agree with me, right? Which is the absolute opposite of dialectic. It's ideology. You take, and you get these challenges all the time. People will come in and say, "Oh, those rockhound people, they don't know. They're always bashing the crystals and breaking them up and ruining their energies." And you say, "Well, so you particularly would be able to see the language that they were coming in with, and frame it. We do it here too. We have this idea that you can find the commonalities among many different philosophies and many different religios, rule sets, but yet the human experience, the experience of spirit and incarnation, and it underlies it all. So this idea of I'm right and you agree with me, right, or you're wrong. You just jujitsu that into, okay, I'm okay and you're okay, or it's okay that this idea of yours, which is a piece of the puzzle, certainly correct, is not the whole totality, and it opens things. Everyone says, all of a sudden the energy, the emotional level goes down and the wonder level goes up, and the ability to interchange without feeling that you're right or you're wrong or you're losing or you're winning. It became a central kind of thing that people liked about coming to the store. It's why they would come again and again. I like those people in there. I like that lady. She's so fun, or whatever. They would feel it, maybe not know what to do or how to do it, but I would say Ravi would do that with these whole audiences, hundreds of people in a room. At the end of the discussion, they would feel that they had gotten something more valuable than the words or even the ideas. They had gotten a human connection.
Yeah, the experience, as again what we said before, the experience of being able to have your question answered. And isn't that the foundation of our relationships?
Yes.
Because in a relationship, conversation is your foundation usually. And conversations about anything usually is a question and answer type of thing. So getting that skill down allows for a broader foundation for relationships, You make room for other people when you realize that what someone's actually looking for is the experience of being in that state of asking, processing, understanding what the question actually is, and then exploring possible answers from a widened viewpoint.
Right.
And that is the experience that all humans are actually looking for, because we as humans know intuitively that we don't have all the answers. It's just the way it is. We understand that, but you get trained into believing that you're never supposed to admit that.
Right.
Which is weird, because especially in the classical training of dialectic, you understand that you don't know everything.
Well, in fact, it's foundational. The philosophy of the querent is that I am a vessel. I have something within me which I wish to present, but I'm willing to be filled and willing to be changed.
Right.
So I'm a vessel. This is classic liberalism, and really classic classic education. It places very little value on being right in an absolute sense about a particular viewpoint, because the idea of being absolutely right is not tenable. However, it does also put into context the morality of all things. That there is good and evil, and there's a way to choose between them.
Right.
It's not looking. See, people confuse right with good,
Right.
and wrong with bad, and I think that when people say I never want to be bad, they also are thinking I never want to be wrong.
Right. Correct.
and bad wrong, which we all know is a bad thing. No, and the idea is if you're wrong, somehow you're bad, and we never want to be wrong or bad. The plane of dialectic is not flat. It has at least two dimensions. This dimension of morality, which is perpendicular to the dimension of bad and good, or rather of right and wrong. You have the idea of being able to discuss something and hold an opinion, and but still allow yourself to have that opinion changed without being bad, or have that opinion affirmed without being good. Your opinion and the moral aspect of it are orthogonal to each other, important in both discussions, and important on a global sense, for your whole self, but not necessarily, like he says, like Ravi says here, giving someone the respect for their opinion, and giving them the right, which is the license to be wrong, doesn't mean that you agree or that you sanction what they're talking about. It just means that in the area of ideas, all ideas are welcome. There's no silly questions. There's no bad questions or good questions. But then you have to use the tools to arrive at a moral or a correct or a more enlightened understanding. And that was his wonderful gift. And it's your gift too.
Oh.
I'm going to just be your apologist and say you're great at this, and I'm just a dope.
No.
No, you can't disagree with me. This is my opinion. Anyway, you have to go. I'm Michael Lyons, and this has been wonderful. And take Ravi Zacharias to heart.
And I'm Mark. And thank you for listening.